Bloodstain, I'm sorry, I meant Underworld Blood Wars is the 5th installment of the Underworld film franchise that's been going on since 2003. In this movie, it's the continuing war between the Lycans and the vampires, except this time the Lycans now have a new leader by the name of Marius, and he's actually doing pretty well for them, and he needs Selene's daughter, Eve, because she has special blood that the Lycans need to become more powerful and to defeat the vampires, and the vampires need to find the daughter before they do, so they need to find Selene and get her back in, even though she killed Victor. It's the same thing. I really didn't have much anticipation going into this movie because I'm not really a big fan of the Underworld series. I didn't see Rise of the Lycans, but from the Underworld movies I saw, they weren't all that great. The first Underworld movie is pretty mediocre, in my opinion, took itself way too seriously. Underworld Evolution, I kind of have a guilty pleasure with because it didn't seem like it was taking itself as seriously, and there seemed like there was a lot more fun action scenes of just blood gushing everywhere. It was actually pretty fun for me. Then we got to Underworld Awakening, and that one was the worst for a while, and then I see this one, and this one is also just the worst one. However, I am not a dedicated fan to this series. There are some fans to this series out there, so if you're a fan of Underworld, you probably liked this movie, and if you haven't seen it, you should probably go see it, because you will like it. That's just a fact. Because it's the same movie. Like, they really aren't doing much different than the other ones. It's pretty basic stuff here. They still got the same melodrama going on between the war and the politics behind it all, mainly through Charles Dance's performance. He really doesn't do much besides giving expositional dialogue about what's going on in the vampire coven. And that's not very good because Charles Dance seems like he doesn't want to be here, like, at all, because he was in Awakening, he had to be here, and he was just like, oh my god, let's get this over with. And I just can't stand the melodrama in these movies. One of the things I didn't like about the first Underworld movie was that it took itself way too seriously, and I liked Evolution a little bit more because it didn't take itself as seriously. But then as soon as we got to Awakening, they just went right back to the melodrama, and I was like, no, you just need to be like Evolution. Except in this movie, they just continued right along with that. And one of the things that's wrong with the melodrama with this movie is that they are expecting you to understand everything that's happened in the Underworld film series. You're supposed to be a huge fan of it, so when you go into Blood Wars, you're like, okay, I know everything about this. And I'm just gonna be upfront with you. I've seen Underworld and Evolution and Awakening like a couple weeks ago to prepare for me eventually watching this movie, and some of the stuff they were talking about, I still didn't get. They even have a recap before the movie, like last time on Underworld, like a soap opera, and I still didn't even remember everything that happened. There's one moment where a certain revelation is made about a character from a previous Underworld movie, and when they said this person's name, it's Amelia, I was like, wait, who is she again? Because they didn't have a flashback cut, like a 1-second shot of the previous film to remind us who this person was. It was just Amelia. Oh, Amelia, I remember that person. They continued talking. I was like, what are you talking about? So I had to look it up on Google, and I was like, this person? And I was like, okay, now I got it because I looked it up, but if you are really so intent on reminding us in the beginning of the movie what has happened, why didn't you remind us about this? This is kind of an important element of the story, no? And instead of trying to get you invested in what actually is happening in these serious situations, they're just kind of stating the situation instead of trying to get you involved through a character you actually love, or trying to tell you what's happening through visuals. It's just really Charles Dance walking down a hallway with someone else talking about what they plan on doing, what's happening right now, why they don't like this one person, what happened to them in the past, and I'm just like, I don't care. There's even a backstabbing plot between two characters, Samira and Viagra, I don't know his name. They have weird names. The movie expected me to care about these two trying to betray the coven and take the top spot of power, but I just didn't care because it's so serious that I couldn't get involved with what should be just a fun movie. Vampires versus werewolves. That should be fun. Stop taking this so seriously. And because it is just so serious, this movie just came across as completely dull for me. They don't really do anything new that's different than the other installments to spice it up. They don't add a new interesting element. There's no actor besides Kate Beckinsale as Selene who actually seems like they care about what they're doing, and that is one of my only positives with this movie, Kate Beckinsale as Selene. I've grown fond of the Selene character as the movies go on, so it was pleasant seeing her back even though the movie surrounding her just sucks. Oh, I just realized sucks is a vampire pun. Ha! And you might be wondering, okay, Jackson, well, you didn't like the melodrama stuff so much and the political side to this vampire coven, but what did you think about the action sequences? Because the Underworld series has had a weird experience with action. The first movie was solidly directed, I will give it that. Then Evolution, the action scenes just kind of went completely different than the first movie, went a little bit more bloody, and I was like, okay, I'm having fun with this is what the Underworld movie should be. Then Awakening happened, those action scenes were pretty boring, and then with this movie, it's just so dull. It's just, we're gonna set up a camera here, and you're gonna swing your arm like this. Okay, let's move the camera over here. And now you're gonna flip them over. Okay, we got that shot. Alright, let's set up a camera right here. You're gonna kick that CGI lichen into the ice. And got it, we're good. The director, Anna Forster, I don't really think she has a huge career in action for her, because this is a really boring action movie. There's nothing interesting going on action-wise. It's basically just vampires shoot some guns, lichens will do some gunplay until they turn into the awful CGI versions of themselves as the actual werewolves. And speaking of which, that's a consistent thing with these Underworld movies, is that the CGI for the lichens look terrible. Whenever they have an actual, costume, it's like, okay, that looks good, but then it's mostly CGI and you're like, oh god. There's even a lichen that is huge, but it has a CGI face of the person that they are, and that was goofy. I will give it this though, actually. There are two moments of action where I was like, this is what the Underworld movies should be filled with. One of them is Theo James stabbing someone directly through here and the sword comes out, and I was just like, holy crap, that's cool. And then there's a moment where Theo James comes out of water and slices a lichen in half, and I was like, that is sweet. Those two moments are what this entire movie should have been. But instead, it's either just ting, 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 or and that's it. And speaking of Theo James, I've mentioned in my Divergent reviews, I forget which one, either Insurgent or Allegiant, but he's a cool action guy. He can do stunts, probably, and he can hold a gun and look cool doing it. But as far as acting, he's just not good in those movies. And it's the same thing here. With Underworld Awakening, I was like, okay, he's not the worst. And in Blood Wars, it's the same thing. He's not the worst person ever as far as acting goes, but he's just so boring. And I feel bad for Theo James, because now that Divergent is heading to TV, he's not coming back for that, he needs a franchise here, and Underworld is probably gonna end, because this movie's like the lowest grossing one in the series. And even the villain Marius is just not that threatening. He doesn't have enough screen time to actually feel like he makes an impact. And everyone's talking him up like, oh, he's the biggest, baddest lichen of them all. He actually organized the lichens in a new way. You gotta be scared of this villain. But he doesn't really do anything that intimidating. Just his entire army shows up and kills some people, and he just so happens to be there with them. Honestly, I really don't have much to say about this movie, because it's just the same old, dull, boring thing as Underworld Awakening, and to some extent the first Underworld movie. Sure, Kate Beckinsale is good. I think she's good in all of the Underworld movies. And I will give the movie credit when they have those two cool moments with Theo James. That was pretty sweet. That's what the entire movie should have been, but the entire movie wasn't that. So I have to fault the movie for that, for being boring and dull, and having actors that just don't seem like they want to be there. This is a movie series surrounding vampires shooting werewolves in the face. This should be fun. This should be really goofy and fun and over the top. Everyone should be having a blast with these movies, but instead, it's all so serious. We gotta talk about why we shouldn't attack the lichens. And then, oh, we're the lichens. We gotta talk about attacking an entire vampire coven now. I'm Marius. I want Eve so I can have her blood. And I'm hoping that this is in fact the last installment of the Underworld series, because originally the script was supposed to be a reboot of the Underworld series, but then they decided, let's just make it a fifth one. And look what happened. It's the lowest grossing of the Underworld movies. You're probably not going to be able to make another one with the same characters, because who's going to come back for these now? I'm gonna give Underworld Blood Wars a D. It's just really dull. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen or anything like that, and it's definitely not the worst movie of 2017 so far. That one is still The Bye-Bye Man. But still, this movie's just so dull and boring, and I wanted to be excited watching vampires shoot werewolves in the face and werewolves tear people apart, but it's just guns and occasional swordplay that's boring. I want fun. But if you've seen Underworld Blood Wars, leave in the comments below of what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.